You make your credit card payment on time, every single month. You watch the money leave your account. You feel responsible, disciplined, like you're doing the right thing. But somehow, the balance barely moves. In fact, there are Americans right now who have been making minimum payments on their credit cards for 5 years, some for over a decade, and they still owe nearly as much as they did when they started. This isn't a story about irresponsible spending. It's not even really about self-control. This is about a system that is mathematically designed to keep you paying, month after month, year after year, without making meaningful progress. And the uncomfortable part? You agreed to it. Americans collectively owe $1.2 trillion in credit card debt right now. That's trillion with a T. The average person carrying a balance owes around $7,000, and they're being charged an average interest rate of 23%. 23%. To put that in context, the long-term average return of the stock market is about 10%. Credit card companies are charging you more than double what the entire American economy typically generates in growth. But here's what makes this genuinely interesting. Most people in debt aren't buying yachts or taking luxury vacations. Nearly half of Americans with credit card debt say it's from covering essential living expenses, groceries, gas, an emergency vet bill, the heating bill when winter hit harder than expected. And now they're trapped in something that feels less like debt and more like quicksand. Let's talk about how credit card interest actually works, because this is where things get genuinely disturbing. Most people think interest compounds monthly. It doesn't. Credit card companies calculate interest daily, every single day. They take your balance, multiply it by a daily rate, and add that to what you owe. Then tomorrow, they charge you interest on yesterday's balance plus yesterday's interest. You're paying interest on your interest, daily. Let's use real numbers. Say you have a $5,000 balance at 23% APR. On day 1, you accrue about $3 in interest. Gets added to your balance. Day 2, you're charged interest on $5,003. Day 3, $5,006. This continues for 30 days. By the end of the month, you don't owe $5,000 plus some interest. You owe $5,000 plus interest that was compounding every single day. After 1 year of making no payments at all, that $5,000 balance becomes over $6,000. But people do make payments. That's the whole point. So why doesn't it help? Here's where the design gets clever, truly clever. Credit card companies set your minimum payment at around 2% of your balance. Sounds reasonable. On a $5,000 balance, that's about $100 a month. Most people can handle that. But let's do the math on what that $100 payment actually accomplishes. At 23% APR, you're accruing roughly $96 in interest that month. Your $100 payment covers the interest plus $4 toward the actual debt. $4. You just paid $100 to reduce your debt by $4. The other $96 went to the bank as pure profit. And next month, you'll do it again and again. If you only make minimum payments on a $5,000 balance at 23% APR, it will take you over 23 years to pay it off, and you'll pay nearly $9,000 in interest alone. That's not even the worst case. Some debt at lower interest rates takes over 30 years to pay off with minimum payments. 30 years! That's a mortgage time frame for a credit card. The minimum payment isn't designed to get you out of debt. It's designed to keep you in it for as long as mathematically possible, while still letting you feel like you're being responsible. This is where it gets darker, because the system doesn't just trap you financially, it traps you psychologically. Research on debt psychology shows something fascinating. People in debt develop shorter time horizons. They stop planning for next year because they're barely surviving this month. And when your time horizon shrinks, you make different decisions, worse decisions. You buy the thing now because later feels impossibly far away. You take the minimum payment option because it preserves your cash today, even though you rationally understand it costs more tomorrow. The immediate purchase becomes irresistible, even when you know the debt level is unsustainable compared to future income. There's a term for this: hyperbolic discounting, the same psychological mechanism that drives drug addiction. But here's the truly insidious part. When you see that minimum payment amount on your statement every month, your brain registers it as progress. You paid, you're current, you're a responsible person. The credit card company even tells you that. Minimum payment due, $100. Thank you for your payment. You feel relief, a sense of accomplishment. Meanwhile, the actual math says you just moved backwards after accounting for new purchases and compounding interest. But the statement never shows you that calculation. It can't, because if you truly understood what was happening, you might stop playing. Let's zoom out for a second and look at what's really happening here. Consumer credit card debt has grown by $463 billion since 2021. That's not because Americans suddenly became irresponsible. Credit card balances hit $1.23 trillion in the third quarter of 2025, the highest level ever recorded. And the interest rates? Also at record highs. Credit card companies made approximately $130 billion in interest and fees last year. That's more than the GDP of Ukraine, from interest charges alone. Now, to be clear, credit isn't inherently evil. Access to credit can be genuinely useful. It can help you handle emergencies, smooth out income fluctuations, build a credit history. The problem isn't that credit exists. The problem is how it's structured. Here's a thought experiment. If credit card companies actually wanted you to pay off your debt, they could do several things. They could calculate interest monthly instead of daily. They could require minimum payments that actually exceed the interest charges by a meaningful amount. They could cap APRs at reasonable levels. They don't do any of these things, not because they're stupid, because the current system is obscenely profitable. 60% of people with credit card debt have been carrying that balance for at least a year. 1 in 5 have been carrying it for at least 5 years. Think about that. 1 in 5 people with credit card debt have been in debt for over 5 years, making payments, doing everything they were told to do, and they're still there. This isn't about personal failing. Nearly 62% of people with credit card debt say they've delayed major financial decisions because of it. They've put off buying a vehicle, continuing their education, even having children. Debt doesn't just cost you money, it costs you your future, the version of your life you could have had if you weren't sending hundreds of dollars a month into the void. And here's what nobody wants to say out loud. For many people, there is no good move. You can't pay off the balance because you're living paycheck to paycheck. You can't stop using the card because you need it for emergencies. You can't declare bankruptcy without destroying your credit for 7 years. You're just stuck. The system works exactly as designed. So why does this exist? Why is this legal? Because we collectively decided that it should be. Credit card companies lobby extensively. They donate to political campaigns. They employ armies of lawyers and economists who testify that any regulation would restrict access to credit or harm consumers. And in a weird way, they're not entirely wrong. If you capped interest rates to, say, 10%, some people genuinely wouldn't be able to get credit cards at all because they'd be too risky to lend to. But the current alternative is that those same people get credit cards at 28% APR and end up in permanent debt. Neither option is great, but one of them is significantly more profitable. The uncomfortable truth is that our entire consumer economy is built on this system. Retail companies want you to buy things now. Credit card companies want you to pay interest forever. And the minimum payment structure keeps the machine running smoothly, except for the person holding the debt. There's no clean ending to this story, no simple solution. You can individually escape credit card debt by paying well above the minimum, cutting expenses, increasing income, or using balance transfer cards with promotional rates. Plenty of people do, but the system itself will keep functioning regardless. What's interesting is that we all sort of know this. Everyone understands that credit card debt is expensive, that minimum payments are a trap, that compound interest is brutal. And yet, the debt keeps growing, the interest keeps compounding, the minimum payments keep getting made. Because the alternative is paying the full balance right now, and for most people, that's actually not possible. So the cycle continues. You make your payment, you feel responsible, and the balance barely moves. The question isn't why debt keeps growing even when we try to pay it off. The question is whether a system that makes it nearly impossible to pay off your debt is a system we should accept at all.